Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight for our College Applications 101 webinar. We're going to be taking you through the timeline of the college admissions process and, of course, like all of the different aspects of the applications, the different types of the applications, pretty much give you a crash course on everything that you are going to need to know and need to have squared away to apply to colleges this fall. So my name is Nick. I'm sure many of you already know me. I am the founder and owner of First Choice Prep. We are a full-service tutoring, test prep, and college advising company. We're, located here in northern New Jersey. We have offices in Millburn and in Livingston, but of course we work with students from across the globe. Tonight, I am going to be playing the part of slide changer because taking us through this wonderful and robust presentation on all things college admissions is going to be Jay, our head of college advising and essay coaching, and also, by the way, elite tutor for us at First Choice Prep as well. A couple of little things for housekeeping. If anybody has any questions throughout the presentation, you can put them into the Q&A widget at the bottom or wherever it is on your Zoom app there. We're not going to be answering questions as we go through the presentation, but we will be getting to them at the very end. So just stick around to the end, and I promise your question will be answered. But yeah, without further ado, Jay, why don't you take it away for us?
Yeah. Hi everyone. Thanks so much for attending the College Applications 101 webinar. My name is Jay, as Nick said. So today, in this webinar, especially if you have a child who is going to be a rising senior, if you're a student that happened to join us, you're definitely in the right place. And even if you are a parent of a child who is a rising sophomore or a rising junior, I think this presentation is going to give you a little bit of a heads up on things that you should mentally prepare for come next year. So let's begin by talking a little bit about our goal for this presentation. As Nick touched on, the goal of this webinar is for you guys to get a little bit of a better understanding of the different types of applications that are out there currently, and tips, strategies, and even tricks on how to sort of maximize all the different components of your college application. From there, we're going to talk about developing a strong timeline and checklist for this process so that you start early, you get everything done right on time, and you feel as though you're organized, collected, and hopefully the process is as stress-free as possible. So let's talk about, what we're going to cover today. We're going to begin by talking about two different main application platforms that are out there currently for US colleges, as well as talking about the components of these application platforms. Then I'm going to spend a length of time talking about the essays, which tend to be for most students the most stressful and most time-consuming part of the application. And then I will give you some tips on how I personally like to develop the college list for our students. And then we'll finish off by talking about timeline and checklist, as well as a little bit on the financial side of things, including aid and scholarships. So, um, before we sort of get into the details, right? One thing that I emphasize to all of our rising seniors is that it is extremely important to start early. Now, one of the main reasons for starting early, and when we say this, we're talking, as soon as junior year finishes, or even, towards early to mid-June before the actual end of the school year. Now, one of the main reasons for this is one, most rising seniors end up having a very busy summer with internships, jobs, summer programs, and whatnot. So chances are you may be away for a chunk of the summer, right? So when we take that into factor, it's a time that is taken away from you being able to work on your essays, right? And for most students, they apply to about 10 to 12 schools. And these days, especially essentially the more selective a college is, the more requirements there will be, right? And so you can almost think of it as, on average, colleges will have about 2 to 3 supplemental essays per school, right? So if you're applying to, let's say, 12 schools, right? Between June and, let's say, December, which is when you will be submitting all of your regular decision applications, you are looking to write almost 30 to 40 essays, right? And, let me tell you, that is a lot, right? So it's super, super important to start early so that have plenty of time to go through the drafts, get feedback, do revisions, make edits, and you feel as though well ahead of the actual application deadline, you have the strongest set of essays written, and that you are completely happy with it. Okay. Now, apart from the essays, right, you want to make sure that you understand what other requirements or components there are to each of the school's applications because it is slightly different per school that you will be applying to. And so developing a timeline and some sort of like a scheduler or checklist or task management tool app to help you stay on top of all of these things can really help this application process become a little bit less stressful. Okay. Um, so yeah, let's go on to the next slide. So, when we think about the college application platforms, the two main ones that we use are the Common Application and the Coalition Application. You can almost think of these two application platforms as being the same. The main difference it just comes down to whether whether the specific school that you'll be applying to is enrolled with one platform versus another. The Common App is definitely the most dominant one. I believe over 800 US colleges currently are enrolled through the Common App, but there are some schools that are not a part of the Common Application, in which case they will most likely be enrolled with the Coalition application. The components of these are very similar. There will be like the main essay, there will be like, background information, extracurriculars, things like that. But again, they're just different platforms with just different schools enrolled in it. There are some schools that are enrolled both with the Common App as well as the Coalition app, in which case you just have to choose whichever one you feel more comfortable with. And then lastly, there are some schools that have an application platform of their own, and they are not enrolled with neither, the Common App nor the Coalition app. So the University of California systems, for example, have their own application platform. So if you are looking to apply to the UC schools, you will have to create a separate profile for those schools. And then there are a very select few who chose like not to enroll in anything and they just have an application for their specific school. So one such school that does this is Georgetown, and they've always just been doing that. The reason why, I have no idea. But these are sort of the big three. Um, so when we think about the components of the college applications, the first three, the personal background, education, and family background are what I sort of call the tedious parts of the application. So it doesn't really require any sort of quote unquote, I guess, thinking, right? You're just providing all the information that colleges will need to learn about who you are, like your date of birth, where you live, where you go to school, information about your parents, siblings, things like that, right? So as soon as the application platforms launch for the new cycle, and this tends to be August 1st of each year, you want to just get these three portions out of the way so that you don't even have to worry about it. Again, it's just time consuming, but it's nothing that will require you to spend a lot of time brainstorming or thinking like the way that you're going to do for the essays. Now, for all components of for all application platforms, the next part that they will ask about are the test results. And here we are talking about the standardized tests, right? So they would include AP exams primarily, as well as SAT and or ACT scores. And if you are currently attending a school that's a part of the IB program, that would also go in this category. Underneath the test category, there will also be an honors awards section, in which case you would list any sort of academic achievements that you may have had throughout your high school journey. Some of these things may include something like National Honor Society or National Merit semi-finalist, things like that. Now, the extracurriculars section, if we use the Common Application as an example, allows you to list up to 10 activities in order of importance to you. Okay. Now, I'm going to elaborate a little bit more on this later, but just know that if you have more than 10, there are ways to provide colleges with information about all the different things that you were a part of. And on the flip side, if you don't have 10 different activities that you were a part of throughout high school, which is actually more common, right? That is a lot of activities. That is completely fine, and you should not feel the pressure to list all 10. Um, and then later, you will be working on your personal statement, which is some people call this sort of the main essay, right? It's the essay that's going to be sent out to all the different colleges that you'll be applying to through each application platform. The common application main essay is traditionally limited to 650 words, and the coalition application main essay is traditionally limited to 550 words, but the prompts are essentially the same. And you can think about it as almost about 2 pages double spaced in terms of the length. And then each college that you'll be applying to will have their own specific questions, such as, what semester are you planning on enrolling in? What type of application, like early decision, early action, regular decision, rolling admissions, if they provided, you will be opting in for. You have to sometimes choose like a specific campus within a larger university if you're, let's say, applying to like a big state school. And they may also ask other questions regarding your like enrollment intentions. And underneath this umbrella, there will be the supplemental essays that we talked about. Again, most schools these days have at least one supplemental essay, and we have seen schools with as many as like 8 to 10 supplemental essays, which, personally, I think it's absolutely insane that they need to know so much about you. But there are some schools, notoriously places like Stanford, have like 8 supplemental questions. Wake Forest has a lot of questions. USC, University of Southern California, ask really bizarre questions like, oh, like what's your favorite snack, or what's your favorite movie, or if you had a song that represents like your life, what would that song be, right? So, colleges tend to get very creative with these supplemental essay questions. And finally, the last components of the application, which are less completed by the student, but more by other people. Like FAFSA is the federal aid application, and this is typically completed by the parents and in tandem with when the application platforms launch. So we're talking again around August, September. And then the teacher recommendations will be completed separately by your teachers. Which, by the way, most schools ask for two primary recommendations, and many schools actually require that those teachers be your junior year teachers, one from a STEM subject and one from social sciences and humanities. And these, again, once you send the request out after the application platforms launch, that your teachers will receive a notification that you have requested a recommendation, and they will submit it separately. And once they submit it, you will see in the application platform that those teachers did indeed submit the recommendations. Now, because the application platforms don't launch until August, right? If you haven't already done so, you want to make sure to ask the teachers that you plan on formally requesting later on in the summer to just let them know, hey, I'm planning on, I'm starting to think about the college application process. I would be honored if you can write me a recommendation, just so that, they know that they know to expect a request from you. Doing this is really important if you haven't already done so, because most teachers, especially at bigger high schools, set like a cap on the number of recommendations that they will be writing each year. So you want to make sure that you get your spot before, the limit is reached. Because let's face it, the popular teachers at each school, they tend to be sort of the same, right? And they always reach their limit. All right, so let's keep going. Um, Academic record and test results. So, we emphasize this at all of our webinars, but your grades and GPA, as well as your standardized test scores, are the most important components of the college application process, right? So you can, again, think of these two as sort of the entrance ticket into where the real battle begins, right? So in order for colleges to be able to consider all the other components of your application, in order for them to want to get to know you better, you want to first make sure that you have the numbers that each college expects from their incoming class of students. Included in this umbrella is the course load and rigor. So you want to make sure that throughout your high school journey, you are taking the most challenging courses offered at your high school and in those courses. Now, a lot of parents do ask, well, my school doesn't offer a lot of AP exams. So, well, does my child need to study separately for these exams, right? And the short answer is no, right? So there's no expectation that you should be doing extra work outside of your primary learning to take AP exams that are not offered at your high school. When you submit your college applications and your high school submits the transcript to the schools that you'll be applying to, attached to that transcript will be an explanation in the form of typically like a course catalog that shows colleges what courses were offered at their specific high school during the time that you had attended. Right. So, for example, if your school doesn't offer an AP government course or school simply doesn't offer macro or microeconomics course. Well, maybe then if you have the time, you may choose to self-study and offer. Now, in terms of the SAT and ACT submission, colleges mainly have two different types of submission process. So a lot of schools these days use what's called a self-reporting system. So what that means is that you, at the time of applying to the schools, you don't need to actually provide the official score report. So in your application, you will self-indicate, self-report the highest section scores that you achieved across multiple sittings if you took the exam multiple times to come up with your highest composite score. So let's say you took the SAT twice. On the first time, on the first try, you got a really great verbal score. On the second try, you got a really great math score. In your application, you will only be indicating those highest scores. And then to come up with your highest possible composite, we sometimes call this super scoring, right? And if you are admitted to a particular school, it is only at that point they will just ask for the official score report for verification. The reason why a lot of colleges do this is because the College Board actually makes you spend money for each of the scores that you send to schools, right? So it's a way for colleges to kind of help you save money so that you only need to send the score report to the school that you will be actually attending. Now, not all schools make sure you check the policies and requirements for each school that you'll be applying to so that you don't miss anything at the time of applying. Now, the last thing I do want to mention is that chances are there will be certain schools that you'll be applying to that will require that you submit all of your scores, okay? Meaning every single AP exam that you took and every single SAT and or ACT sitting that you were enrolled in. And so for that reason, generally we don't encourage students from taking the SAT or ACT more than, let's say 3 or 4 times, right? It's great if all the colleges on your, college list allow you to select the scores that you submit. But again, there are many schools that require that you submit all of your scores. So just, be prepared for that. Let's move on to talking about extracurriculars and honors. So as I said before, most application platforms will allow you to list up to 10 activities in order of importance to you. Now, these activities are essentially anything and everything outside of the classroom, right? So that includes athletics, it includes jobs, research, internships, clubs, organizations. It could be family duties, it could be religious activities, volunteer, community service. Again, anything and everything that outside of the classroom that you are a part of since ninth grade. Okay. If there is an activity that you are doing even before then that you're still doing in high school, those would also qualify as well. Now, when we are talking about, what's considered important, right? We typically consider three different things. The first is the type of activity. So when we say the type of activity, we're talking about, is the activity something that is widely recognized, right? So to give you some extreme examples, let's say something like Model United Nations is a club that is pretty much offered internationally, right? It's offered at most high schools in the US, and many schools abroad also have Model United Nations, right? So colleges understand what type of activity this is, and they already have a lot of information about it, right? So if you are heavily involved in an activity that is already widely recognized, typically that would constitute a certain level of importance over, let's say, an activity like like I don't know, anime club that perhaps may only exist in your high school. The second thing to consider is the leadership and slash role that you took part in the particular activity that you were a part of, right? So let's say you were a part of soccer for since you were in ninth grade, and eventually you made it to varsity soccer team, and you happen to also become the captain of your soccer team, right? Holding a leadership position would also move that activity up in your activity list. And lastly, the longevity of the involvement, right? So there are some exceptions to this, obviously, right? So if you were, if you decided to take part in like a summer program that literally was only for over the summer, right? You didn't do it for a long time, but it may still be high up on the list if it's really relevant to what you want to study in college. But generally speaking, an activity that you've been a part of for a longer
Looks like we may have lost Jay there. Oh, here he comes back.
Oops, sorry. I'm not
Hey
sure what
there.
just happened. I think I just dropped for a second.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
your internet has been sort of cutting in and out here and there. We're getting the, majority of this, but
Oh,
you were
oh,
at longevity of involvement.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
So
all good.
yeah, yeah. So the longevity of involvement, again, if you are involved in an activity for a long time, right? That would generally move the activity higher up in your activities list. Again, there are exceptions to this. So if you were a part of an activity where it's just a summer program that you applied to, then it only happened for a amount of time, and it may still be high up on your activities list if that program was very competitive and it's strongly relevant or directly related to your prospective major. But again, make sure that you list them in order of importance, okay? And the application platforms will allow you to drag each list up and down so that you first list them out and then you can, rearrange them as you see fit. Some schools do provide an optional resume for you to submit. I will talk about this a little bit more later on, but just keep in mind that if you are planning on submitting a resume, it's not just a mere repetition of the extracurricular section. And lastly, the honors portion of the application platforms are typically in a separate category as the extracurriculars. So if you have had any academic or non-academic achievements slash honors throughout high school, there is a separate place for it. The common application specifically will allow you to list up to five honors slash awards in order of importance to you. All right, let's move on. So the writing time, right? So again, it is the most time-consuming part of the application process, okay? And so you want to make sure you start early. You want to make sure that you have plenty of time to brainstorm and piece together what you want to include in the personal statement versus the supplemental essays so that holistically you get to tell colleges everything that they need to know about who you are. Now, the personal statement, right, remember, is the essay that's going to be sent out to every single school that you'll be applying to through that platform. This means that you do not want this essay to be college specific, right? It is an essay designed for you to be able to share your story, right? And tell them a little bit more about who you are beyond the simple numbers provided by your GPA and your test scores, and beyond the extracurricular information that you are providing at the surface level, right? So it's a chance to tell them about your ambitions, something about your background that you believe makes you a unique applicant, right? Right. And again, it should set you up for, the more specific things that you will be discussing later on through the supplemental essays. And then the supplemental essays, right, generally can range from, I want to say, about we've seen as short as like about 30 words all the way up to 600 words, right? So some schools like Wake Forest or USC that I mentioned earlier have very short supplemental essays that are designed to be, a few words, even just like one sentence. And then there are some schools like, let's say, NYU that traditionally ask, why do you want to attend NYU, right? And for these essays, they tend to be a little bit longer, anywhere from 400 to 600 words. Make sure supplemental essays are individualized to that specific college, and we generally want to refrain from, quote unquote, recycling the essays, right? So each school will look for different types of students, and we want to make sure that the supplemental essays are catered to the specific style, education philosophy, and culture of that particular school. The one thing that I do want to mention is that there is an additional information section that is provided for all of the application platforms. This a lot of students actually sort of misunderstand what the purpose of this section is, and just keep in mind that it is not a place where you should be writing an additional essay about who you are, nor is it a place for you to include activities beyond the 10 that you've already listed in the extracurriculars. The additional information section should only be used if there are certain things that happen throughout your high school journey that perhaps significantly affected your academic progress, whether in a positive way or in a negative way, right? Or if there have been, interruptions to your high school learning experience, such as like a major injury, or let's say there was like a family issue that had happened. Okay, so again, it is not a place for you to write an additional essay, and if you do so, many colleges will reject you simply for not following the instructions. So uh, here's a brief summary of everything that we had just discussed in terms of the personal essay statement and the supplemental essays. Together, these essays should create a holistic view of who you are as an applicant so that they are packaged together in a way where colleges after reading your essays feel as though, hey, oh, I feel like I really know who this student is, and we would love to have this student in our community. Okay. Additional items. So, if you are a student who has a like an non-academic talent or interest, such as, studio art or music, a lot of schools will provide you an opportunity to submit a portfolio, and some schools actually limit you from submitting a portfolio unless you are actually planning on studying that interest, right? But there are also many schools that allow you to submit a portfolio even if you are not planning on pursuing a major within that field. So look into the different policies, and if you are planning on submitting a portfolio, this also tends to be very time consuming. So just make sure to plan ahead. Now, to elaborate a little bit more on resume, again, not every school offers you the opportunity to submit a resume. However, if a school does give you that opportunity, this resume should only be for you to be able to highlight details on one or two particular experiences where you were very heavily involved. So, for example, a student who was very, very involved in speech and debate and have had a number of different competitions that they were a part of, and just a whole list of achievements within speech and debate, may choose to submit a resume that is just focused on that activity because the extracurricular section doesn't give you enough space to provide all the details, right? But it should not be a reiteration of the extracurriculars. And if that is the case, then that your application all of a sudden is just going to look repetitive and it's going to start to look weaker. Okay, so resume should only be if you have information to provide beyond your extracurriculars and honors/awards sections. Now, the interview process. So many schools, not all, some schools give you the chance to do an interview with the school. Now, there are three different types of interviews that are offered. Some schools, and more schools these days, and we expect more schools this application cycle to opt in for what's called a video interview. Okay, so the University of Chicago, Brown University, they have for a number of years been utilizing this video interview process in which you sort of record about a 3 to 5 minute video where you talk to the colleges specifically about why you want to attend that school, why you believe you're a great fit, and you're letting them know who you are, almost as though you're doing a traditional interview. You would record that video, you would submit it in your with your application, and it will be an additional component to the application. These tend to be optional for the most part, but if a school does give you the opportunity, we do always encourage you to take advantage of it because it's another opportunity for you to explain to colleges a little bit more about who you are. Now, the more traditional types of interviews that are out there and that are still offered are alumni interviews, and these either can be requested prior to you submitting the application. So Wesleyan University, for example, offers alumni interviews where you have to take the initiative to request the interview, and there will be like a place on the website where you select a specific date and time, and they will pair you up with an alum who will do an interview with you. And this again is an optional interview. Now, there's the sort of non-optional interview. So the required alumni interviews are the types where after you submit the application, the school will reach out to you first if they are interested in you or interested in learning more about you, where they will contact you, place you in touch with an alum, and you will be doing interviews with them. Okay. And many of the most selective schools follow this process even to this day. Now, one last thing, sorry, Nick, that I do want to say is that a very select few schools offer students the chance to do an on-campus admissions interview. Okay, so this actually takes the place of alumni interviews that you would be doing otherwise. Okay, so Bowdoin College, for example, in Maine, offers students when they visit the campus to do an admissions interview. Okay. They do also have an alumni interview, but this is just like a separate thing that they are also offering, right? If you are applying to a school, if you're applying to a school where they give you an admissions interview opportunity, definitely take advantage of that opportunity if you have the means to be able to travel to the school and actually be on campus, because they tend to have a more direct impact on your application as they are conducted directly with an admissions officer. All right. Now, financial aid and scholarships. So there's what we call the need-based scholarships versus merit-based scholarships. Okay, many schools offer merit-based scholarships, and you won't really know what type of merit-based scholarships are available at the school that you're applying to, nor the amount of aid that will be provided through the scholarship. But if you apply to a school and let's say that school really, really wants you and wants to give you an incentive to attend their institution, they may provide you that opportunity at the time of offering you the admissions. Okay, the merit-based scholarships will most likely be come from schools that are your safety schools, right? So schools where your GPA and test scores are above the median, right? And schools typically have a number of different types of merit-based scholarships. So again, they will be offered if you are accepted and at the time of you receiving your admissions letter. But also keep in mind that the more selective a school is, the fewer merit-based scholarships there will be. And there are many schools who just don't have merit-based scholarships at all. Now, need-based scholarships are need-based is a little bit different, right? And this will come from FAFSA, right? So when you as parents submit FAFSA, the colleges that you'll be applying to will determine, right, how much aid that you will need based on your family income from the past, let's say 2, 3 years, right? And this is offered as a separate thing, and you can think about it as a federal/financial aid and not a scholarship. Okay. Now, one thing that a lot of parents ask when it comes to this, and just keep in mind, is that if you have the intention of receiving financial aid, that will not affect your chances of admission to the school. Okay, so at the time of reviewing your application, colleges will not know whether or not you are requesting financial aid. So don't worry if you are, requesting aid and you think that that may potentially hurt your chances of getting in. Now, in terms of scholarships, apart from the merit-based scholarships that are offered within the school that you're applying to, there are a lot of external scholarships that are out there these days. And if you're a rising senior, I definitely want you to look into the external scholarships and see if you qualify to be able to apply to any of them. Many of the scholarships will have some sort of specific target audience, whether that's a specific ethnic or racial background. It could be gender specific. It could be academic interest specific. It could also be region specific, right? But then there are also sort of more general scholarships that are awarded to any student out there. So definitely look into available scholarships, as most of those applications will also begin over the summer for rising seniors. Okay. All this sort of goes to, talk about how tuition and the cost for room and board is a significant part of the college life, right? The next 4 years of college, it's no secret that U.S. colleges are very expensive to attend. So planning out how the next 4 years of your life will look in terms of the cost will be an important discussion that you should be considering and having with your family. So, building a college list, super important, right? So, let's again use about 12 schools, right, as the number of schools that you should be applying to, right? When we think about applying to 12 schools, I want to say that in general, you should have about 2 to 3 safety schools, which are schools where your numbers are well above the median scores of students that are typically admitted to the school. And target schools will be the bulk of your list. They should make up about, I want to say like 5 to 7 schools, right, of your college. Numbers are right around the median. The typical the reach schools will be schools where your numbers are slightly below the median of the numbers that are typical of students accepted to that institution. Reach schools, I want to say you should have about 2 to 3. Again, target should be around 5 to 7. And then safety, I want to say 2 or 3 schools. Now, just keep in mind though
Hmm.
that safety schools should still be schools that you are very excited to attend. They should not be schools that, if you get in, you're going to be miserable, right? So the safety schools and virtually every single school in your college list should be schools that fit all the different checklists of what you are looking for in college in terms of the geographics, meaning location, the size of the campus, the academic opportunities, and everything else. In order,
Jay,
yeah.
sorry, just to back up for a second, because I think you were breaking up during your discussion of target schools. So
Mhm.
just to clarify, target is where your numbers, GPA, and test scores fall right into their like median 25th to 75th percentile.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Okay.
Reach, of course, you're just under there above that. Like the schools are above,
Exactly.
and then of course safety, I think we're all loud and clear on. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So the reach schools, just again, you can sort of think about them as your dream schools, right? So chances are you're probably not going to be admitted, but if you are admitted, you are going to be absolutely thrilled that you are for sure going to that school. So in general, again, aim for about 10 to 12. We've seen some students apply to as well as many as 20, but just keep in mind that just means you have a lot more essays to complete. Now, in order for you to sort of, learn a little bit more about what schools are your reach, target, and safety, I definitely encourage you to look into CDS, which is the Common Data Set. It's a public information that every college needs to provide every single year about who they accepted, what type of students they accepted, and the numbers around the applicants that they decided to accept in terms of their GPA and test scores. Okay, so the common data set will give you good information about where you are versus the students that were accepted the previous year. And then more useful, I want to say, is Naviance or the equivalent of whatever your school uses, which provides internal data on where your numbers are versus students from your high school that applied to the same institutions in the past 5 years. Okay. Naviance specifically will typically have a graph that shows where your GPA and test scores match up versus other students who applied and were accepted, deferred, or rejected to those institutions. These two will give you a really good understanding of your admissions chances. Again, purely in terms of the numbers, not based on anything else, any other components of the application, but this will help you develop a realistic yet a very strong college list. And of course, tours, reviews, online search can also give you general information about what types of students that they will be looking for, and give you some tips and strategies on gaining a competitive advantage to those schools. All right. So application timeline, very important, right? So again, as soon as junior year finishes, right, June to August will really be a time where you try to be as productive as possible to strengthen your extracurricular slash resume. And this is the time when you really want to spend a lot of time brainstorming and begin crafting your essays, okay? When you are brainstorming your essays, you are not brainstorming just to figure out what to write for the main essay, but you are brainstorming to figure out what are all of the things that I want to be able to discuss in my application. And then you're essentially putting together a puzzle to see what belongs in the main essay versus what belongs in the supplemental essays, what things are already mentioned in my extracurricular description, what things are already, mentioned in my resume, right? So the brainstorming part, we say, is typically the most time-consuming part of, the application process. And the early summer part of leading up to your senior year is definitely the time to do that. Now, August to October would be when, if you need to take the SAT or ACT one more time, the October SAT would be the last SAT test that you can take before, in order for you to meet the deadline for early decision and early action applications. Okay. If you are taking the ACT, September administration would typically be the last one you can take in order to meet the deadline for the early sides. Okay. This would also be the time where you are meeting often with your school counselors, with your independent counselors, right, to figure out how to, whether your college list is a good list, right? What other components of that applications that I need to check off? Are there certain requirements to each college's that are different, right? And also to handle the FAFSA that we had mentioned before. It's also a good time for you to check in with your teachers if, there are definitely some teachers that really push the deadline for submitting the recommendations. So if you are planning on applying to a school that, let's say, has an October 15th deadline, or let's say that you're applying to a rolling admission school where it's a first come, first serve basis, you want to let your teachers know so that they can submit the recommendations on time. Now, October to December, probably the most crucial time. By the way, an important tip is after you submit your early applications, you want to immediately begin working on your regular decision applications. Okay. The decisions for the early applications typically aren't released until about the second or third week of December, which means that if you wait until the decisions come out, you're only going to have about 1 to 2 weeks to work on the bulk of your applications, which will be the regular decision type. Okay, so make sure that you spend October to December to complete all of your regular decision applications. You wait until the results are out. And then if, let's say, you're admitted to your early decision school, yay, you're done. You don't have to submit these. But if you aren't admitted to the early decision school, now that the applications for the regulars are completed, you can just send those out. Okay. Um, but last thing I want to mention is that October to December is also a time where you really have to prioritize your academics. Okay. For the early applications, schools will receive your first quarter grades for senior year, and you want to make sure that they are very, very good, and they are in some ways even better than how you were doing in freshman, sophomore, and junior year. And for your regular decision schools, schools will receive your first semester grades. Okay. So first semester is going to be very, very important time for you. And so academically, you want to show that you are maintaining good results, even doing better than how you were doing before. Quick summary of everything that we discussed today. One, again, get started early. Okay. Figure out what schools you want to apply early decision, early action, regular decision. Understand the different types of applications that you can opt in for each school. And remember to keep in mind that early decision is binding, right? So you can only choose one school to apply to for early decision. Early action has a similar deadline as early decision, but it is non-binding. And for the most part, with the exception of certain schools that have certain restrictions on the early action application, you can submit as many early action applications as you would like. It doesn't provide you any significant advantage in terms of your admissions chances, but there is the incentive that you are finding out about the decision before, the regular decisions, where the decisions will typically come in like March/April. Okay. So this all goes to say prioritize and keep track of important deadlines, right? Utilize the resources available around you, whether those are your teachers, alums, students that you know who are currently attending at the schools that you're planning on applying to. Look on Reddit, look on Quora, go on YouTube, go on the university pages, and do your research so that you have all the information that you need to know about each institution. Okay. And lastly, I do always say you have to manage your expectations. Okay. The reality is, and the reason why you are applying to so many different schools is that rejections are inevitable, and every single student gets rejected at least somewhere. Okay. And while it is okay and completely understandable that you are sad, right, that you are rejected to an institution, keep in mind that a lot of times this is not because you aren't good enough. Okay. A college may simply deem that, you are just not the best fit, or maybe they already accepted a student with a very similar profile as you, and just by sheer luck, your application happened to come after that student, right? And so it is important to manage expectations, and it is completely okay, because remember, the goal is not for you to be accepted to 10 schools. The goal is for you to be accepted to one school that you really, really want to go to. Okay? All right.
Awesome. That's great, Jay. Thank you. Thank you.